Hello and welcome to yet another episode of A Week in Film. I'm your host, the Padnator, as always. Before I jump into this fourth episode, I just want to thank you all for sticking around and still watching this messed up movie podcast. I understand that my rambling is just as bad as it's always been, but I am working on it. Trust me, guys. One day, 57 episodes in, I'll be perfect at this whole thing. But until then, you're going to have to listen to me mess up and stutter my way through film reviews. Again, thank you for sticking with me, and we have 10 whole movies this episode. Finally, an even number instead of 9. But let's just jump right into it because 10 movies is a lot. So on June 10th, Monday of June 2024, I watched Solaris, directed by... I'm forgetting his name, but a very popular Russian director. It'll come to me in a minute. He directed Stalker as well. Incredibly talented director. Now, before I get into the review of Solaris, I have to be completely clear with you guys. I did fall asleep watching this movie multiple times. Now, not to say that this is a disservice to the movie. In fact, I think this movie is brilliant, much like, I want to say Darren Aronofsky, but I know that's not him. There we go. Much like Tarkovsky's other works, sorry, I had to look at my notes, his movies are very slow, they're very dialogue heavy, there's very little audio outside of that dialogue, and this is Solaris's main strength and weakness in a sense. Now, much like Stalker, this film is very slow. It talks you through these very intricate, complicated topics and ideas. And I think that's why movies by Tarkovsky are so easy to fall asleep to, because it's so much dialogue, and as someone who doesn't speak Russian, it's kind of hard to really fully focus on a film and read every line of dialogue when it's this intricate and this deep. But Solaris takes place on a space station, which is much different than Stalker on a post-nuclear war Russia, I want to say. I really liked the idea surrounding Solaris, the whole concept of what's a human, what defines life. This is all very intriguing, and the way Tarkovsky delivers it is admittedly very impressive and cool. But the only thing I think the field this movie fails in is its intrigue factor. For some reason, to me, I think it's just a personal preference, but I think Stalker was a lot more interesting and caught my attention a lot more. Because whereas that movie focuses on human nature and the human experience, this movie focuses on defining a human and defining love. This movie doesn't ask you questions, but in fact gives you new answers to questions that you probably never had. And the movie works so well because of this, but it also works so well because of its interesting and unique score, its outstanding cinematography, and its ridiculously talented actors. Now, if you can trust Tarkovsky for one thing, it is his dialogue and his style. This movie reeks of Tarkovsky style. For a while, I thought this movie was a ripoff of 2001, but both of those movies capture the same abandon in space aspect very differently. And I think, honestly, I can say Solaris is a much more, at least thought-provoking film than 2001. Now, I would still rather watch 2001 over Solaris, but I still thoroughly enjoyed this film. With a lot of Tarkovsky movies, and like this one, I think this movie kind of requires multiple viewings, just to really soak in those concepts. Again, I think the language barrier is kind of a big part of it. But overall, I really, really liked the movie. I thought it was an excellent movie. I gave it a 9 out of 10. I definitely recommend. It is almost 3 hours of just Russian dialogue. Who wouldn't want to watch that on a nice Monday afternoon? But anyway, on June 10th, Monday of June 2024, same as Solaris, I watched Bicycle Thieves. Now, I'd been meaning to watch Bicycle Thieves for quite a while. I'd heard it's a classic. It is one of those classic Italian films that kind of inspired the greats like Scorsese and other similar directors. And I am going to get it out of the way right now. I think this movie is a capital M masterpiece. This movie captures those Italian vibes that only Italian movies can capture. Now, sure, I'm sure you've seen like Goodfellas and The Godfather, and those movies capture a very strong Italian-American aspect, a very strong Italian-American vibe, for lack of a better word. But Bicycle Thieves and other movies like Cinema Paradiso capture that raw, almost untouched Italian vibe, and I love the movie for that. I could just, when I think of this movie, the scenes that stand out in my mind are, I mean, obviously the main scenes of the movie, but also just those little moments where everyone just starts yelling at each other and throwing their hands in the air, because that's what Italian culture was and kind of still is. The movie's premise is really interesting. It kind of instantly has you. This is I think, during World War II. It was filmed during World War II and takes place during World War II. It's about the Rome job crisis, the economic crisis, and watching this, for lack of a better word, family guy go through these financial troubles, and he finally gets a job and has his bicycle stolen on the first day, is heartbreaking. And watching him through the course of like 2 or 3 days struggle to find his bike and kind of tussle with the fact that if he doesn't have this job, he's out of work forever and potentially loses his apartment, which is the last thing he kind of has. It really strikes the human spirit more than anything. Like a lot of classic films, this movie captures what makes a human human. And it's a weird comparison to draw, but I'll tie it back together in a second. It's that same feeling that Rocky captures, where it's the indomitable human spirit overcoming and successfully defeating an enemy. This movie captures the soul-crushing destructiveness of defeat. This whole movie is this poor father trying to win his livelihood back, and at the end, it doesn't work, and he simply has to live with the fact that it's over. He has no solution. He's failed. And the journey to that conclusion is gorgeous. And I mean, if you want to say it in layman's terms, the film leading up to that is gorgeous. Cinematography-wise, I really love it's a weird thing to credit, but when it comes to older movies like this, I love the aspect ratio. Just the way everything looks, the way everything is kind of squared off. The black and white, too. I love the way it looks. It makes the movie feel even older, which is a good thing because it literally took place during the 1940s. The performances and the kind of, not practical, but real nature of the whole film, it feels really familiar, for lack of a better term. Like comfort food, you could say. The relationship between the father and his son, it feels really real. I don't think they were actually father and son, but watching these two interact, you could take part of the movie out of context and say, recorded father and son interaction from 1945 and put it on Twitter, and most of the people who like the tweet would believe it. And the score too, it's just so emotional. It's so winding. It feels so powerful. It's movies like this that remind me why I love cinema so much. And I know it's easy to throw around, but when a movie is this simple, this movie could be boiled down into a sentence. Man and his son hunt for bicycle. But the way the story is delivered and the desperation in the father and his traveling through the stages of grief is just so emotionally impactful that you only really get that from a real cinema experience. And I mean, I know I already said it, but Bicycle Thieves is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Definitely check this one out. It's on Max. It is absolutely worth your time. You won't regret a second of this wonderful movie. especially if you love Italians. And even if you don't, give it a chance, it might reverse your racism. Moving on to June 11th of 2024, landing on a Tuesday, I watched Bones and All. So, I know I say this before each movie, but before I get into the movie proper, I have to talk about the director, Luca Guadagnino, however you say his name. I am a not huge fan, but I am a sizable fan of this director's work. I've seen Call Me By Your Name, which I did quite like. More recently I saw Challengers, which I really, really liked. So going into Bones and All, I'd heard a lot of good about it. I had heard that this was, or at least on Letterboxd, this is one of his top, like, heavy hitters, kinda. I was excited to see because, you know, I like Timothée Chalamet. The concept of the movie was intriguing, and someone very close to me was a huge fan of the book. So I was very excited to watch this movie. I actually ended up watching it with them, and I was just excited because they were excited about it and I was excited about it, just to see how this went. And it breaks my heart to say that this is Luca Guadagnino's most average, boring film that I've seen from him. So you have to come at this movie from a very unique perspective, at least when it comes to me. I'd been building up watching this film for ages. I meant to watch it right before Challengers, and then I didn't get to that. I'd actually meant to watch it like right after I watched Call Me By Your Name because I was such a fan of it, but it never really came to fruition. So when I watched Bones and All, there was like almost a year's worth of build-up on my shoulders to watch it. And I understand that could have messed with my opinion and how much I liked or didn't like the movie, but I just wanted to be as objective and not binary, but just as realistic with the review as possible. I didn't want to say like, oh wow, that was a year, you know, that kind of thing. I just wanted to enjoy the film for what it was. And unfortunately, I think not only style-wise, but directorially, this is one of Guadagnino's worst movies. So first, the story. As someone who did not read the book, but this person that I was watching it with was very experienced in the book, had actually read it quite recently as of watching the film, I was informed that this movie was very not book accurate, and I believe it, they read the book. And I think now adapting a book is always tricky because it's important to add your own directorial flair to it. But when whole chunks and scenes and character moments and characters and just whole massive plot details of the original story are removed and changed for no reason, it feels kind of pointless. It feels like a director trying to take credit for what's an admittedly interesting story. This movie follows some cannibals. It follows their journey trying to survive in the real world and trying to hide. And the concept itself is intriguing, but the way that the story unfolds and the way that it progresses feels really just ham-fisted. A lot of it feels reliant on the fact that you already know the story, so that you kind of already know the rough outline of what's supposed to be happening, and you just kind of go with it. But again, as someone with no experience in the story, this made... I'm sorry, can you hear that? Guys, an alien is outside my house right now. But as someone with no experience in the story, it just made no sense to me. And it's a shame. And what I was hoping for, the whole film, is that at least if the story wasn't good, the performances were admittedly good, and I was hoping that the technical aspects would really wow me. But there's something in this movie that just wasn't quite there. Now, comparing it to Call Me By Your Name and Challengers is almost unfair, because technically speaking, those movies are outstanding. The setting of Call Me By Your Name, the small Italian town, really beautiful like scenery, and Challengers is this ultra hyper intense sports movie, so it's kind of hard to compare the two to a country trotting, mostly like countryside cannibal story, but there's so much potential for the visuals of this film that I think it absolutely folds on. A lot of this movie's beautiful moments are just big open fields and beautiful skies, and not to say that that's a bad thing, but I think the movie really fails to capture that clear horror feeling that it was going for. You could tell this movie really wants to be like a horror romance almost, but it just messes up so bad, and the characters just aren't really likable at all. A lot of the character choices at best feel questionable, and at worst feel like movie-ruiningly bad. And I know I'm dogging on the film a lot, but it's still technically a very good-looking movie with a very good score and great acting. So at the end of the day, you can't really get too angry at it. You can still get pretty angry, but you can't get super frustrated because Luca Guadagnino, however you say his name, his talent as a director kind of holds the film back from being a complete failure, but still almost falls down there. Think of it as those playgrounds at McDonald's with the very tight straps that you can fall through if you're heavy enough. He almost hits the bottom and breaks his tailbone, but barely saves himself with his directorial style. Just looking over my notes here, just some weird creative choices, but overall, I mean, the movie still looks good and the acting is still good. It is still a fine movie overall. I gave this movie a 5 out of 10. I definitely wouldn't rewatch. The only reason I think I would rewatch is if I read the book and then went back just to see how truly bad it was. But other than that, I don't see myself ever revisiting this film. One thing before I move on to my next film is that a lot of the good things that I heard about this movie were related to the romance, and to me, I just didn't really see it at all. These are very talented actors. I know the black girl from Waves, which I watched a little while ago, an incredibly talented actress, and I know Timothée Chalamet from a bunch of movies. Forgive me for not knowing the girl's name. Very talented actress. So I know these two are very capable of strong performances, but the way the characters are written and the ways that everything is done, it just feels so sloppy. It just assumes that you have read the book and that you kind of accept these changes and you just go along with it. Again, this is a 5 out of 10. Incredibly average movie. Would I recommend? I recommend if you have someone who's read the book to watch it with, just to see how angry they get. But anyway, moving on to the same day, on June 11th, 2024, Tuesday, I watched in theaters for Ghibli Fest, The Secret World of Arriety. So this movie had been on my radar for a while. I thought the style of it was very intriguing, and I was only really putting it off so long so that I could watch it in theaters for Ghibli Fest, because I just really like watching movies in theaters. Before I get into it, my theater experience was pretty good. Not to derail it too bad, but there was this guy in front of me that just had his feet out, like right in the center of the screen. It was almost unwatchable. Like, it was so disgusting. Like the gross, like buttery floor. I don't know how you do that, man. But theater experience aside, this movie is excellent. What really caught my eye about this film was, I mean, I know it sounds silly, but the nature of it. The way Arriety and her family, the way they're all so small, just the way like the world reacts around them. One of the standouts in my mind was how whenever they poured a drink, it would be one big drop instead of a smooth stream because of the way like surface tension works or whatever. I just thought little things like that were really neat. Like one sugar cube lasting a whole year. Just a lot of little things like that. You know, just the animation, and I know it's really easy to praise when it comes to a Studio Ghibli film, but the visual style and just like swagger and charisma in this film visually is off the charts. I mean, what really surprised me about this film was learning that Hayao Miyazaki was not the primary director, because this style of animation, and not to say that animation is solely up to the director, but it is a big part of it. And this really gorgeous, unique style is pretty unique to Hayao Miyazaki. So watching it come in another director's film was very interesting. And it looked really great. To the point where, for the entire movie, I thought it was directed by Hayao Miyazaki. This movie is just really whimsical. I love the way everything in this film works. The story is surprisingly emotional. Not surprisingly, but you don't think you would care about people who are almost the size of ants until you watch them get put in jars. They deliver so much emotion. I watched the Japanese dub. Especially the voice actors and the voice actresses, incredibly talented. They really deliver, especially Arriety's voice actress, deliver that gut-wrenching seriousness of the film and of the story, you know. And I think the only place where the film faults, as much as I was just praising it, the writing and the characters, is the boy character, the sick boy, whatever his name was, Nayo, or I don't know. His character feels just really... His character doesn't feel like a character, but feels like more of a plot device, you know? The way he acts and the way he does things, it feels really forced. It feels like the story writers needed someone to advance the plot, so they wrote in this character. And what the movie ends up really feeling like is Arriety versus Grandma. There are just things I wish this movie did a bit more of. I wish this movie, as weird of a critique as this sounds like, I wish they had ventured into the garden more. I would have liked to see Arriety just interact more with animals and little bugs and stuff. This is a kind of weird comparison, but I wanted from this movie what the video game Grounded on Xbox gave me, where you see these ants that are like the size of you, and you fight these ants, and you ride on these ladybugs, and you swim in this huge koi pond. And I wanted that same whimsical feeling of that film, of that game, transferred into this film, and it almost does it. It's like 90% there, but it just doesn't fully deliver on that. There's just it's not wasted potential, because they use the story and the premise really well, but they could have just pushed it a little bit further. I love the focus of the little people, whatever they're called. There's a name for them, but I forgot. I love the focus on them. I think it's great that most of the film is from their perspective, mainly Arriety's. Her character herself is very interesting to watch. She's a very driven, young, tiny woman. Watching her struggle through the scenario of her inadvertently getting her family kicked out of this house they've had for years was really impactful. And watching her mature very rapidly to save her family from this was also really great. I think I already mentioned it, but the score is just excellent. There's just a lot about this film that I really liked. A lot of those staples that you expect in a Studio Ghibli movie to watch, when you watch them. Just really heartwarming, really gets you invested really easily. It's just, it's movies like this that make you remember that animation is not just a child's genre. Animation is so much more than just a Minions movie, you know. Some of my favorite films of all time are animated films. Coincidentally, one from also Studio Ghibli. but I think I've been rambling about this film for too long. I absolutely love this movie. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Just a couple tweaks in the writing and a couple more moments in there. I think this movie would have been a all-time masterpiece. But for what it is, still an excellent, gorgeous, stupendous movie. Yeah, 9 out of 10. Definitely recommend. You physically cannot watch it for Ghibli Fest anymore. But next year, if you can, I 1000% recommend you do. Moving on to June 12th, Wednesday of June 2024, I watched Bad Boys 2, and Bad Boys for Life. So I know you're wondering, why did you just name 3 movies? And to put it simply, this was potentially one of the most dangerous and risky experiments I've ever conducted myself in. I'm going to most likely end up doing a more in-depth video on this experience, but to give you a little taste, a little appetizer for what this video will be about. Have you ever looked at your little nephew's phone and seen Subway Surfers, slime cutting, GTA 5 gameplay, and a mukbang all playing while a Reddit text-to-speech voiceover plays? If you've watched that, I basically did this with all 3 Bad Boys films. I'll expand on it later. And I mean, I know it sounds obvious, but do not do this for your own sake. This is something they would do to asylum patients as experiments. I think this experience actually justifies why testing on like apes is like morally okay. I mean, I can talk about the films a little, but I mean, the first Bad Boys, Bad Boys 1 and Bad Boys 2, Michael Bay directed. They're pretty cool. I like Michael Bay's really gritty, like disgusting direction style. I think it fits this film, those 2 films pretty well. Bad Boys for Life. This movie is kind of an atrocity against man. This is the one that I probably ended up paying most attention to, and it's just like so just mid and boring. Like, I don't want to sound evil, but it's like I just didn't like care at all. Like, it was just so shit. I mean, I could give you numbers, but they don't really matter. In order, 5, 6, 4. Definitely don't do this experiment, but I have been rambling for too long about all of these films. I am going to get a drink of water. I'm going to collect my thoughts. I'm going to go run 4 laps around my block, and I will get back to you in about a minute to talk about the rest of the weekend film. So stay tuned for the during the mid-break. I have a lot more to talk about. So yeah, I will talk to you guys soon, and enjoy the monkey. Hello and welcome back from the mid-break. I hope you did indeed enjoy the monkey. We still have 5 films to go, so I'm going to jump right back into it for the sake of time. On June 12th of June 2024, which is Wednesday, the same day as the experiment, I watched Bad Boys Ride or Die. So I was incredibly excited for this movie. This is pretty much the only reason why I actually did the experiment previously mentioned. And you are probably asking yourself, why do you, as someone who recently watched Solaris, a Tarkovsky film, why are you someone who just watched a 1945 Italian film about a bicycle thief so excited for this probably schlock action movie that for some reason is getting an IMAX release? And let me tell you right now, it comes down to a simple 4-word sentence spoken in the opening scene of the movie from Martin Lawrence, and it goes as follows: "Are those dogs fresh?" There's something so intoxicating and just so attractive to me about stinking shit with flies floating around it. This movie, I went in knowing, will not be a masterpiece. This will not be high art. This will not be something that leaves me a changed man, like some movies have managed to do. I knew that this movie would at best be an enjoyable, fun time, and damn it, that's exactly what I got out of Bad Boys Ride or Die. Now, let me tell you, as someone who technically watched the other 3 Bad Boys right before this, I went in actually having a decent amount of knowledge about this whole fucked up franchise, and I am very happy to say that when your brain works in overclock superdrive mode, you actually retain a lot more than you think. I picked up on a lot of the little callbacks to prior movies in this one, a lot of little references, and I thought this movie was almost a reinvention for the Bad Boys reboot series of films, which is Bad Boys Ride or Die and Bad Boys for Life in the other order. So this directing duo, I'm forgetting their names, I think they're brothers. They also directed the Miss Marvel TV show for Disney Plus. They really turned around their style for this movie, and whereas Bad Boys Ride or Die, whereas Bad Boys Forever, or For Life, whatever it's called, I don't know, guys, I barely paid attention to that one. Whereas that film feels like a generic, safe return to a kind of beloved franchise from the early 2000s, this movie feels like a truly realized scenario on what a film like this could be. This film has the main duo of Will Smith and Martin Lawrence on being fugitives from the police, and it just gives the film so much more potential because they have to be sneaky. They can't just go back to a police station every other scene like they did for a lot of the other films, for all of the other films basically. They had a lot more locations and they had more to do in this movie. To speak more broadly about it, I thought this movie was great. I'm going to tell you right now, I thought it was an 8 out of 10. I really liked this movie. The action was spectacularly shot, which shocked me. The performances and the character writings for mainly Will Smith and Martin Lawrence's characters were really great. The callbacks didn't really feel forced. They felt pretty well integrated into the film. The music was, whatever. It's that same kind of hip-hop inspired Miami music, which I'm not huge on, but it fits the film pretty well. It's just, this movie is fun, like I was talking about earlier. This isn't high art, but it was fun. What makes this movie stand out, though, is the action direction. And I know it's hard to, when you've had such highs in the past, like John Wick's and Nobodies and The Raids and all these outstanding action movies, it's hard to have an action movie that stands out strictly because of its visuals, like the way it's shot and the way it looks. But Bad Boys Ride or Die does this so well because it's so unexpected. Because compared to the last film, which has very generic, like, military man shooting, action, cinematography, and choreography, this film really just, like, kind of gets, this is going to sound really lame, but it kind of gets insane with it. There's this one scene that was in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler, but Martin Lawrence runs out of ammo, and Will Smith has a pistol. And Will Smith throws the gun to Martin Lawrence, the camera follows the gun, goes into body cam view, and then Martin Lawrence shoots a guy. I don't want to over-exaggerate, but when I was watching this in the theaters, I was trying not to jump out of my chair and scream in the theater. It had me so excited, it had me so hyped. The story in this one feels pretty solid. It feels like a good conclusion to the Bad Boy story. Will Smith's character finally settles down. He was like a bachelor for pretty much the other 3 movies. There's a lot of like multiple movie-long payoffs in this movie. With Martin Lawrence's son-in-law, he finally does something. He's this U.S. Marine, and he finally shows his training, and I think one of the best action sequences of the movie. There are just so many fun moments in this movie. There's a cameo from that guy who shrugs his shoulders with really big eyes. Michael Bay has a cameo in this movie. The really tall guy from the first film has a cameo in this movie. There are just so many little moments that you appreciate, especially if you watched all 3 prior films at the same time. I think that's the only reason I like this movie so much, is because prior to this my brain had been totally fried on what felt like a mental assault. So yeah, again, I gave Bad Boys Ride or Die an 8 out of 10. I thought the story was pretty solid, the writing was pretty solid. I just think everything in this film was solid, and the action really stood out as being just great. Almost unbelievably great for what I expected from this film. Definitely look forward to seeing this directing duo's talents again. I'm not going to watch Miss Marvel because I don't care, but if they ever decide to direct another action movie, I will certainly be waiting with bated breath, because it really feels like they fell into their own for this one. Anyway, on June 13th, which landed on a Thursday of 2024, I watched Under the Silver Lake. So, before I watched this movie, I had no idea who the director was. I knew pretty much nothing about the movie. All I knew was that I liked the poster for it, and I didn't even know that Andrew Garfield was starring. So, as I watched this movie, it dawned on me. If you have seen Sorry to Bother You, which is a film that came out way before this, like in 2017 or something, it follows a very similar structure. Now, not to say that these films are really too similar in the grand scheme of things. They are still pretty different. But Under the Silver Lake, whereas Sorry to Bother You they both go in ridiculous directions. In this conspiratorial, deep state kind of thing, like secret societies. Whereas Sorry to Bother You goes in a more silly direction with like the horse people hybrids. Under the Silver Lake goes into not a more realistic direction, but it goes into a more, like, there's more to chew on in this one. Visually, I thought this movie was incredibly impressive. I really like the colors and just the way LA pops in this movie. It's always hard when you're doing a movie that's set in current day, because... I'm sorry, can you guys hear that? Dude, I hope everyone on a motorcycle right now crashes into a wall and dies. Anyway. It's always hard when you're doing a film set in modern day, because as time goes on, things get less and less stylish and they get more and more genericized. But I think this movie captures modern LA feel really well, surprisingly. For a lot of the film, I thought it was set in like the early 90s or something, just because it looked so stylish. A lot of the films, like Tech, feels very early 2000s, but it's still clearly set in modern day because they're on like Twitter and stuff. So it's a nice meld of the two styles, and I think LA, especially for something like this, is the perfect setting. The city of hippies, bums, and billionaires, in Hollywood. So Under the Silver Lake follows this very fun conspiratorial aspect with very strong visuals, a remarkably strong soundtrack, outstanding performance from Andrew Garfield, and a pretty good performance from the supporting cast, what there is of a supporting cast. I think this movie comes down to having very soft and fun visuals. I think it carries itself really competently. It always feels like it's easy in a film like this to feel like they're constantly just making stuff up to keep the movie going. But in Under the Silver Lake, it feels like it's all been very carefully laid out. It feels like there was something like a very clear start and end, and even a middle to this story when they were writing it out. It feels very put together, which is hard for a film like this, because even if it is put together, you have to display to the audience that it's put together. But I was never for a moment thinking, oh wow, that must have been hard to think up of on the spot. This movie is just fun. I mean, I know it's hard, I know it's boring to say, it's just fun. But the way Andrew Garfield carries himself, the way he delivers dialogue, the way you really feel he's like kind of a bum pervert loser. But watching him go through this just to try and find this chick that he was trying to bang is really endearing. And I think it's just really sweet. I just love this like conspiratorial, constantly unfolding story. I think it fits a kind of thing like this really well, and I just like how it plays out. I think this film plays out in a really interesting, fun way. It keeps the viewer thinking. There are lots of callbacks, especially if you're good with like imagery. This movie really rewards you because it's all over this film. It's not subtle exactly, but if you just remember things, the film doesn't tell you about them explicitly every time. It's just a really rewarding, fun movie to watch. I think the only place where the movie really faults is the lack of a supporting cast. I think Andrew Garfield, I mean, not to say that he doesn't carry the movie on his shoulders, because he does, but I think the movie could have really done with at least someone else to kind of balance him out. I thought his girlfriend at the start of the movie would do some more. She just kind of disappears after that scene where he's in the bath. And a lot of one-off characters, which is not a bad thing because it works pretty well, but I just wish there was a little bit more continuity, because if it linked in even better, this movie would be like a modern classic. I still really loved it. I still really loved watching it. It's the first time I've been this locked in on a movie for technological reasons, I guess you'd say it. But I wasn't moving my legs, I wasn't bouncing my legs, I was barely blinking. I was sitting there 1,000,000,000% enveloped in this movie, and it rewarded me, and I absolutely loved it. But anyway, I think I've been talking about Under the Silver Lake mostly enough. I definitely recommend this one. This is a recent, I want to say it's an A24 film, but even if it isn't, definitely worth your time. This was directed as the same guy as It Follows. Incredibly talented visual stylist. His movies just look really good. I really enjoy the way they look and the way they feel, and this movie is no exception. I am waiting for another movie from him with bated breath, because I love his visual style. I just love the way he carries himself. He always gets the right actors for the right job. He's a great director. But to stop glazing under the Silver Lake, I hate that term, but I probably should stop. Before I move on, this is a 9 out of 10. I thought this was an excellent movie. I would 1000% rewatch with someone special or anyone at all. Anyway, on the same day, June 13th of June 2024, on a Thursday, I watched Hitman, Netflix original, came out recently. So I really only watched Hitman because it was at the top of the Letterboxd trending page, right now anyway. I mean, by the time this video comes out, it might not be, but right now anyway, it's still at the very tippy top. I really wasn't expecting anything from this movie. It was directed by starring Glenn Powell, directed by the same guy who directed Before Sunrise, which is an excellent romantic movie. So I went into this movie not even knowing that. I just knew that people really liked it, and at best, a Netflix movie is very comforting and just very easy to watch. So I wasn't expecting anything too mentally challenging or too intense on me. I was just expecting a good, nice time. And honestly, I got exactly what I didn't pay for, because on Netflix. I got exactly what I streamed for, guys. This is a very fun, lighthearted, easy to consume movie. Glenn Powell is like such a ridiculously talented, fun actor to watch, especially in this movie. The way he carries himself and the way he really transforms into these people. I thought it was a really cool, unique idea. The idea of a man pretending to be a hitman to get people arrested is admittedly very interesting, and it works really well. His romance with I feel so bad for never knowing the woman's name in the movie. But his romance with the Mexican chick in this movie is really good. You can really see the bond forming, which is something you don't really get in Netflix movies. And I know it's kind of cheap to keep pointing back to the fact that it's a Netflix movie, but when you've watched your parents watch so many bad ones, it's kind of easy to expect just generic dog shit. And this movie isn't that. This movie has real heart and soul in it, you know? Not to say that it's like visually a very outstanding movie, not to say that it's like a technical marvel, but the score is kind of goofy and bouncy. The way it's filmed is really soft, and certain scenes are very visually appealing. The way it's paced, the way it looks, the constant cutbacks to Glenn Powell arresting montages, I just thought it was really sweet to watch. Again, it's just a very easy watch. This isn't much like Bad Boys Ride or Die. This is not high art. This is not an Academy Award winner. It'd be pretty cool if it did win, though. I like Glenn Powell a lot. This isn't high art. This isn't something you go to the Oscars for, but this is just something you put on when you're folding laundry, and at the end of it you go, that was good. I like that movie. And that was pretty much my reaction to the end of this movie. I mean, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Very good movie. I just think visually the movie was kind of underwhelming. I think they could have done a bit more with it. And there are a couple, not plot holes, but just kind of plot details that don't quite make sense, but they still work pretty well. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Again, score is really bubbly, really bouncy. This whole movie just feels really like lighthearted. And it's partially based off a true story, even though the guy in real life didn't kill someone. I almost forgot to mention this. I really like the constant references back to like sociology. He is a teacher at a university. I thought it was really cool because you can tell he's talking about himself when he gets into lessons about the self and that kind of thing, and how you got to chase down who you want to be. All that kind of, I thought it was just kind of a little nifty idea, and I think it was executed really well. I really like this one. Again, I gave it a 7 out of 10. It is a nice, light, fun movie. This is the kind of movie, maybe not, there's a lot of sex in this movie. But, I mean, if you're older, you could definitely put this one on for your parents, and I'm sure they'd enjoy watching it. Again, Glenn Powell's a really talented actor. The director for this movie kind of flopped. I mean, Before Sunrise is like a masterpiece. And this movie, it feels romantically anyway, not nearly as strong. I know it's kind of cheap to compare a director to their best work, but something about this movie just doesn't feel like it's from the same guy. But yeah, again, for the final time, 7 out of 10, really enjoyed it. And now on to potentially the hardest film on this list to talk about on the same day, June 13th of June 2024, Thursday. I watched Inland Empire, directed by David Lynch. So, from my understanding, there are two kinds of David Lynch movies. There is the Eraserhead and there is the Blue Velvet. Blue Velvet follows a more traditional story, like 3 beats, acts, like 3-act structure, characters and character payoffs, that kind of thing. And I thought Inland Empire, being 3 hours and 1 minute, would be more story focused like that. I thought this would be a very traditional but Lynchian inspired film about film. And what this film turned out to be was perhaps the most vicious and guttural attack on one's mental and visual stimuli sensors I've ever watched. This movie, if you watched Eraserhead and you thought, man, what a crazy movie, I can't believe that was like an hour 30 or however long Eraserhead is, this movie will make you throw up blood. Inland Empire does that same thing where it follows an almost traditional storyline for about an hour of the movie, maybe not even like 45 minutes maybe, and then it just throws you into the deep end and you have no idea what's going on. I mean, it's hard to talk about this movie because so much of it is, in my mind, just feels like flashing colors with emotions associated with them. I mean, some of the standout visuals, like the bunnies at the start and the suits, and it's like a game show and they're laughing. I thought that was really cool. I'm forgetting her name. Laura Dern. Stupendous, ridiculously talented, ultra versatile, 1,000,000,000%, I love her actress. She is so good in this film. She really sells all of these borderline schizophrenic visions that David Lynch had for this movie. It's constantly jumping from scene to scene, and she sells it so well because she's in pretty much all of them. The constant throws to Poland were interesting, admittedly. The rabbits again were really cool. Just so many unique visual things. This is something that Eraserhead couldn't really do, because Eraserhead was just one dude. Whereas this movie is a movie about making movies, and you watch Laura Dern go through this experience, go through this hellish nightmare reality thing. There was a lot more to play with in this movie. A lot more sets, a lot more really memorable visual locations. The apartment, the apartment building, the like Polish cell block, the mansion, the rabbit's living room or whatever. There's so many scenes in this movie that I think I could draw out perfectly because of just how visually distinctive and just memorable they are. The only reason that this movie isn't a 9, spoiler alert, it's an 8, like Eraserhead was because I think this style of filmmaking is better suited for shorter films. Not like short films, but just like Eraserhead, how Eraserhead is like 92 minutes or something. I think not stretching, but making a film like this that lasts 3 hours is a little obscene. Something I noticed that I do when I watch a David Lynch movie, and by David, I mean like crazy David Lynch, like this and Eraserhead. Something I noticed that I do is I'll completely zone out or zone into the movie and become utterly horrified by the smallest things. And this is one of my favorite things about David Lynch movies, because his visual style does it so well that at moments it feels like genuine horror. You're watching it and you feel so like viscerally shocked and just shook into your core that it's hard not to like kind of shake a little when you're watching it or tear up. But when the movie is doing the same emotion for 3 hours, it gets a little tiring, and eventually I physically could not like zone into the movie anymore. I was still watching it, I was still like as locked in as I could be on it, but it just loses that power once it feels repetitive, and unfortunately it does feel kind of repetitive after about 2 hours 15, 2 hours 30. That last like 30 minutes is just a real slog. Again, lots of standout moments. I'm thinking of the choreographed dance scene for the ending and the random dance scene in the middle of the movie. Spectacular editing, spectacular direction, brilliant director David Lynch, big surprise. I mean, again, this movie's an 8 out of 10. By no means am I spiting it. This is a great movie, no doubt. But I think, I just think Eraserhead did it better. Yeah, 8 out of 10. I mean, I love David Lynch. I am patiently waiting for Mulholland Drive to be streaming somewhere so I could watch it, or even Lost Highway. Inland Empire is definitely my least favorite Lynch film of all time, that I've seen so far. But if my least favorite film from a director is an 8 out of 10, then I think we have quite the director in our hands. But yeah, I really, really loved Inland Empire. Great movie. Don't watch if you have... don't watch it if you have epilepsy. I think you'll die in like 30 minutes. Otherwise, check it out. Don't watch this movie on psychedelics or any drugs at all either, because I think your heart would explode. Anyway. Hear that, guys? That's my movie journal. For my final film of the video, number 10, or I mean technically number 9, or if you really want to get technical, this is like number 12, if you count all 3 bad boys. Anyway, for our final film of the video, on June 14th of 2024, on Friday today, I watched After Hours, directed by Martin Scorsese. I'd been meaning to watch After Hours for ages. It was on Tubi, and I just really wanted to watch it because I love watching not lesser known Scorsese, because it's not like this is an indie film, but I just love watching these more offbeat Scorsese movies. It's easy to think of him as like the like mob movie director, because Goodfellas and Casino and The Irishman and all these movies are just so iconic and so ingrained in like pop culture that it's hard not to think of Scorsese as the gangster director. But After Hours is kind of a movie where it's just like a fucked up movie. You're watching this guy, Paul, I want to say his name is, go through just the worst night that you've ever seen in your entire life. And what makes the movie so special is Scorsese's visual language and just the personality he gives to the film. I gotta say, even though, Michael Mann, I don't think had made Thief yet by the time this movie came out. But this is almost copying his style with really wet, moist cement, or I guess asphalt streets. It just looks so visually satisfying. This like dark, middle of the night New York City look is incredibly appealing visually. Lots of interesting locations like the club and all these different wacky apartments that Paul ends up in. The diners are really cool too. They're all just lots of really great settings in this movie, lots of good set pieces. And I mean, you couldn't talk about After Hours without talking about the unbelievable character writing. I mean, you'd swear these people are aliens, they're written so well. And I know that sounds like an insult, but the way that Paul is the straight man, and let me clarify, I use this term in another video. The straight man is not referring to Paul's sexuality, but instead the role that he would play in a comedy duo. Paul plays the guy who is not laughing, and literally every other character in the film plays the not straight man or the funny guy. Paul is just trying to get home. He needs $1.50 to go on the subway. He needs like $8 to go on the taxi. He needs a phone to call someone to pick him up. He needs literally anything to get him home, and for the life of him, he cannot get home. And watching Paul struggle through all these different little avenues to try and get home, and watching them all dead end just for people to think he's a home invader and trying to kill him by the end of it, it just feels so silly, and it feels like a really good dark comedy. This is an excellent dark comedy. I felt so bad for Paul. You're watching this guy go through hell because he made a booty call and the chick killed herself. Like, it's insane. I hate to swear, but this is like a clusterfuck of a movie, in the best way possible. I know this sounds like an insult, but like the way the story is written and the way everything goes down, it's most describable as a clusterfuck, and I absolutely adored it. This is a 10 out of 10, and sure, I might be Scorsese biased. It might just be because of the name on there. But I really do think this film is something really special. I think this film is definitely not appreciated enough, kind of like King of Comedy, or The King of Comedy. It's important to look back at a director like Scorsese and see, not to say that After Hours is an underground film or anything, but it's important to look back at films like this before his hits, before his Goodfellas, before his Killers of the Flower Moon, before his Shutter Island, before his Wolf of Wall Street. It's important to look back at the roots of a director to see what they were doing before they really fell into their style. And this movie feels like a great encapsulation of what being a young, talented director is like. You could feel in this movie constant exploration and experimentation with filming techniques, and I think it works wonderfully. The way the main guy is directed to act, just the way everything plays out, the way everything is performed, the way everything looks, it feels so purposeful and it feels so thought out. I just loved it. Again, this is a 10 out of 10. If you've seen a lot of Scorsese and you haven't seen this one, check it out. Absolutely. It's on Tubi. It's insane when you watch this and realize this guy went on to make Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Casino, Killers of the Flower Moon, Shutter Island, Wolf of Wall Street. He made a Taxi Driver before this. It's insane to realize how talented and how just genius Martin Scorsese is. And I know I'm on the dick right now, but it's Martin Scorsese, so I think it's kind of justified. But I have been rambling about movies for far too long. I've just about hit the hour mark, which is not particularly a goal, but I've hit it anyway. I have not felt this exhausted from recording a video in a while. I hope you guys could hear the extra passion in my voice. There's actually someone with a gun to the back of my head right now, making sure that I do this perfectly. Yeah, I hope they don't kill me with their gun. But that's pretty much all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know episode 3 didn't do so well, but I'm going to keep pumping these out as long as I have 2 viewers. The person with a gun is also coincidentally my biggest fan. So, yeah, I want to keep rambling, but there's nothing to ramble about. Inside Out 2 will probably be on the next one. That'll do good numbers, I hope. It's always nice having a relevant movie in the thumbnail or in the title, anywhere really. I sound really tired, but it's 11:25 and I'm ready to lay my head down and catch some well-deserved Z's. But I've been rambling too long about how long I've been rambling. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you stick around for the next one. I hope you can tell how much I really like doing this one. I think I fell back into my rhythm. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, or if it's night, I hope you have a wonderful tomorrow. And I will see you in the theaters, and you will see me in your sub box. Have a wonderful day, y'all.